Star Wars is a saga constantly discussing the topic of loss. Entire planets are destroyed, families are torn apart, orders collapse. But loss is not exclusive to a single character in Star Wars. In fact, it's a fundamental principle for both the Jedi and the Sith. For the Jedi, loss in some way is supposed to be irrelevant. How can you lose something when you are attached to nothing? For Jedi, when loss comes, their reaction speaks to their depth of commitment. For the Sith, loss is a source of power. The passion and pain that loss evokes ignites the dark side. Across the many movies and shows, few, maybe no character in the franchise embodies the experience of loss more fully than Obi Wan Kenobi. From his earliest days as a Padawan to his final moments on the Death Star, Obi-Wan is not defined by what he gains, but by what he loses. He loses his master, the woman he loves, his brother, his order, his home, and yet he does not break. This is a video about Obi-Wan's grief. Not grief as a passing emotion, but grief as a discipline, a posture toward life and loss. Across films, animated series, and live-action shows, Obi-Wan Kenobi shows us what it looks like to mourn deeply while refusing to harden. His story is not just about survival, it's about what grief can teach us and how it can be transformed into compassion, clarity, and hope. Obi-Wan's first great loss is also his first defining responsibility. In The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn dies in his arms, struck down by Darth Maul. This isn't just a death to a mentor. Qui-Gon was the closest thing Obi-Wan had to a father, the man who raised him in the Jedi way. His loss leaves Obi-Wan not only mourning, but also bound by a final request.
You will train the boy.
To train the boy, Anakin Skywalker. That vow becomes Obi-Wan's first way of handling grief. He turns pain into duty. Instead of collapsing, he channels sorrow into action. He completes his trials, takes Anakin as a Padawan, and steps into a role he feels unready for. For many, this is a familiar response to loss. Death and loss are often coped with through new responsibilities, structure, obligation. But here's the paradox. That promise to Qui-Gon both saves Obi-Wan from despair and sets him on a path toward greater sorrow. Training Anakin becomes his defining mission, but it is also the mission that will break his heart. His very faithfulness or attachment to Qui-Gon's wish ensures that grief will return to him in even more devastating ways. If Qui-Gon's death ties Obi-Wan to the Jedi Order, Satine Kryze represents the possibility of leaving it behind. During his time as her protector, Obi-Wan fell deeply in love. In the Clone Wars, he admits he would have left the Order if she had only asked. That confession is crucial. It reveals that Obi-Wan's loyalty to the Order wasn't passive obedience. He could have chosen a different path. Satine embodied the possibility of a different, maybe more human life. A life of companionship, family, perhaps even peace. But both of them made their choice. She remained committed to Mandalore. He remained committed to the Jedi. Their love story lived as a memory, a possibility, rather than reality. In Satine, Obi-Wan carried not only the love of a woman, but the symbolic vision of a different life. When Maul murders Satine, Obi-Wan doesn't just lose her, he loses the very idea that his life could have turned out differently. It's not only the death of a loved one, but the death of the what if. Kenobi's road not taken, collapsing forever. And here, Obi-Wan's grief is tested in its purest form. Maul killed Satine not only to hurt him, but to break him, to provoke vengeance. But Obi-Wan refuses. He doesn't deny his pain, he accepts it, but refuses to let that pain define him. Unlike Anakin, who would allow loss to turn into rage and possession, Obi-Wan chooses restraint. His grief doesn't make him less of a Jedi. Really, it makes him the truest kind of Jedi. Satine's death then is a hinge point. It's both personal and symbolic. Kenobi carries not only the weight of losing someone he'd loved, but the recognition that his life of sacrifice is the only one left. From this point forward, grief is not just what happens to him, it's the shape of his existence. The tragedy of the Chosen One is not just the loss of Anakin. It's the loss of everything Obi-Wan believed in. Anakin was not just his Padawan, he was his brother, his friend, even in some ways his son. The epic fight between them is grief made visible. Two people who loved each other forced into violent opposition. When Obi-Wan walks away from the burning shore, we see him at his lowest. He didn't just lose Anakin. He lost the promise he made to Qui-Gon. He lost the future of the Jedi. He lost the one person he thought could restore balance. And worst of all, he believes it's his fault. Survivor's guilt takes root. If he had been better, wiser, stronger, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And then there's Order 66. The Jedi Temple burns. His home, his order, his way of life, all gone. At this point, grief doesn't just wound him. It collapses his entire identity. He becomes not Obi-Wan Kenobi, Master Jedi, General of the Republic, but Ben, a hermit in the desert. His exile is not about hiding from the Empire. It's about hiding from himself, from the unbearable weight of guilt and grief. For years, Obi-Wan survives by shrinking. He cuts himself off from the Force. He avoids connection. He lives a half-life because to feel is to suffer. This is grief in its most paralyzing form: isolation. The 2022 Obi-Wan Kenobi series featured on Disney Plus examined some of these ideas. After learning to reopen himself, finding meaning in protecting Leia, the pivotal moment arrives. Kenobi's reunion with Anakin and his introduction to the fully suited Darth Vader. When Vader, through the mask, admits that he killed Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan is released from years of self-blame. Maybe he finally understands that Anakin's fall was not his burden to carry. This is a critical step in grief, recognizing the boundary between responsibility and choice. Obi-Wan could guide, but he could not decide for Anakin. By letting go of the guilt, Obi-Wan's grief softens. He reclaims his strength, his identity, and even his compassion. The Force flows again because he is no longer hindering it with shame. Years later, Maul comes to Tatooine seeking his own closure. Their final duel only lasts seconds, but its real power is in what happens after. Obi-Wan catches Maul as he falls, holds him, and really comforts him in his last moments, treating Maul with the same care as those he's lost. In one of the greatest scenes in all of Star Wars, Kenobi's development is represented as Obi-Wan flashes through different positions, each one representing a different point of his life, a different point of his grief. This scene is the culmination of Obi-Wan's grief. Maul had taken everything from him: Qui-Gon, Satine, years of torment, but Obi-Wan chooses compassion. He doesn't excuse Maul's crimes, but he refuses to hate him. It is grief transformed into mercy, proof that Obi-Wan's losses never made him bitter. This is what sets him apart from Anakin. Where Anakin's grief led to fear and eventually cruelty, Obi-Wan's grief leads to tenderness. He shows that grief doesn't have to consume, it can clarify. On the Death Star, Obi-Wan raises his blade and lets himself be struck down. It is the final act of a life marked by grief. but also by resilience. He turns his own death into a gift, ensuring Luke and Leia's survival. In this act, grief is fully transfigured. Obi-Wan doesn't cling to life or rage against death. Instead, he accepts loss, embraces it, and transforms into the continuity. His body vanishes, but his voice and presence remain. His life becomes legacy. Obi-Wan Kenobi teaches that grief is not something to erase or indulge, it's something to carry with discipline. He's not the triumphant hero who wins by conquering. He's the guardian who endures by mourning well. In a galaxy consumed by fear, he remains gentle, and in his gentleness, he preserves hope. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more of these kinds of videos, let me know in the comments, and please subscribe.
Goodbye, old friend. May the Force be with you.